Good afternoon, everyone. An absolute pleasure to be here today, sharing this next in the series of webinars from the Association of Network Managers in Education. I am absolutely thrilled to be joined today by colleagues from an organisation called Nine. We've already seen some of their products in the past, and we're going to learn a little bit more today about what they've got to share with us. So just a couple of quick housekeeping things before we start. Those of you who've joined will realise already that your cameras and microphones are muted and chat has been disabled. However, Q&A is live, so if you have questions for our hosts and presenters today, please feel free to share them in the Q&A. Details of what's talked about today will be posted on the portal at some point slightly after the event. And also there will be a feedback survey that's live at 4:30 today when the event ends, and we'd encourage all of you to offer feedback, good or bad, but preferably good, because let's face it, it's going to be a good presentation. So I think that's all the housekeeping that I need to do. So without further ado, I will introduce Mark Orchison from Nine, and Mark is going to talk to us today about securing our schools, a deep dive into cybersecurity training and IT management. Mark, welcome, and thank you for joining us.
Cheers, Dave. I'm also joined by my colleague Charlie Duxbury. So Charlie will be the point of contact if anyone wants to get in contact with Nine afterwards. So Charlie's just here. You can see her there. She's put her video on. As we're going through this, please do put any questions and answers questions. I'll provide the answers into the chat. Dave's keeping an eye onto those. Dave will interrupt me as we're going through with anything that's that he feels is useful in terms of asking me, or anywhere where he feels perhaps I should go a bit deeper. I am the founder and CEO of Nine. We're about 90-ish people spread across the UK, team in North America, a team in Asia also, and we provide a range of consultancy services and software products for supporting schools to stay safe, secure, and compliant. So on the slide deck here is just an overview of what we do. We are working within schools every single day, so we're an independent consultancy practice in terms of supporting schools to better protect themselves in this specific discipline of cybersecurity, and we are actively responding week in, week out to schools that are affected by cyber attacks. So the things I'm going to talk to you today are real life cases of what has happened and the specific trends and that we are seeing, and some observations in terms of what we think would be useful for you to know, and some tips and tricks as we go along. So I'll sort of set these objectives here in terms of supporting IT professionals with the knowledge and tools to protect from cyber threats, looking at the latest trends, specifically what we are seeing like now and also into the future. And when I say into the future, I'm looking at a 12 to 24 month horizon, so not too far in the future, so just sort of over the hill. Some best practices around safeguarding your systems and your data, looking at some effective strategies for training of staff, which is a big area that we are seeing a lot of weaknesses in, and some things that you can take away, and some cost-effective approaches for implementing robust cyber protections. So we've put together a number of different things that you can get access to for either free or very low cost. And working with Charlie in order to get those, you sort of need to touch base with Charlie before the end of the academic term, end of July, basically, to ensure that you can maximize the benefit of those. So let's start with the trends, and as I'm going through, any questions, chuck them into the Q&A. So in terms of the things that we see, and week by week we do a significant number of cybersecurity tests, and the tests that we do range in scope and breadth and depth. So you have a cybersecurity testing that is basically a vulnerability and pen test. Typically what people are directing, or what's in the DFE digital standard saying that's like the minimum that you should be seeking to undertake, where we are looking at the likelihood or the number of vulnerabilities that are within your system's architecture, and the likelihood of those being compromised for an exploit, and then an attacker being able to laterally move through your system's architecture and then compromise data or compromise systems. So that's like the lowest level, all the way through to a 1,000 point check at a configuration level. So not only the vulnerabilities, but also the config level of how the systems are put together and how tight they are. So each week we do, a significant number of those, and so we get a good amount of data at both ends in terms of where the current challenges are when it comes to trends in terms of reducing the likelihood of a cyber attack. Now, the three here that we typically see that are still problems, and these have been problems for many years. But solving these three, in generally our experience, you can probably reduce your risk of a cyber attack, north of 90%. But from each week when we do these assessments, we are still seeing problems in these three areas. The first one is around your network config. And when we look at network config, we're not just talking about your VLAN architecture. We are then looking at port level authentication and ACLs that essentially puts a zero trust architecture around your network, your switching architecture, and then all the devices that are connecting to both your physical network and also your wireless network. And in most cases, when we see a successful attack that has taken place, they may have VLANs, but essentially they haven't got ACLs or port level authentication. And consequently, all the scores that we generally see that have had a successful attack, unless that attacker has directly come in through RDP or some other direct entry points directly into the domain, attackers are navigating laterally through the network, but putting in place VLAN, PLA, and ACLs, is going to really significantly reduce the likelihood of actually a successful attack happening. Number two, and it's closely related to point one, is the weak patch management, and also the knowing how your devices on your network can be exploited for lateral movement. So I'll give you an example of this. One of our clients, we have done the PLAs, ACLs, VLANs, very strong network architecture. We have been doing pen testing on the score for a number of different years. And this year, just recently, what we have done is we have taken different variations of the BYOD scheme in the school. Many of you may not have a BYOD, so teacher and student laptops, and we've taken those image builds that have been deployed on those devices to see whether actually we can compromise the specific device, and then start executing code on that device that essentially can jump through any VLAN, ACL, or any other types of protection on the network. And in this particular instance of this school, we could use some resources on the devices to actually start exploiting the device and its resources to start potentially laterally navigating through the system's architecture. However, we couldn't get anywhere because of actually the protections that were within the network itself on point one here in terms of the basic configurations. So as a trend, what we're generally seeing is if you put in and then have the secure network, you are significantly reducing the ability for any device, whether it be BYOD or a specific image deployed device by a school, to use its own resources or PowerShell to navigate around the network. And the last thing that we are generally seeing is schools not implementing or testing any sort of disaster recovery. So the schools that generally come to us who have had a successful attack or are in the midst of an attack have done limited to no work on how they would respond to an attack. So you have, for want of a better phrase, a lot of headless chickens running around to try and work out how you actually break down what you have to do, not only from a technical perspective and an operations perspective, but at a leadership level, comms to teach, to staff, to parents at that level. And we aren't really seeing any investment from schools in that particular area also, and that's a big concern, and that hasn't generally changed over the past few years. And when I sort of say this sort of focusing on this third point here, what does sort of disaster recovery look like, and why is it useful? This is an example of a school that we've been working with over the past 4 years, where we do scenario testing. And what we would expect to see in that point 3, to put some meat on the bones, because the other two sort of, generally you'd understand what I'm talking about. In scenario testing here is understanding the types of failures to do with your system's architecture, looking at the types of scenarios you're going to be facing, evaluating what's going to happen, the inputs that would be required, what the rollout plan would look like, what success criteria looks like in relation to that scenario testing, and then comments in terms of how that has worked in terms of pass and fail, and the amount of time that generally is required. So schools that have a greater exposure to cyber attacks aren't doing the network configuration, aren't necessarily looking at the types of devices and how their resources within those devices can be exploited, and certainly aren't putting into place any sort of scenario testing around how they would respond to a specific component of their system's architecture going down, and testing to actually see whether they could recover from that type of attack. So this is a practical thing I wanted to show you, because I think it's quite a nice takeaway, as it's quite a simple a disaster recovery plan without going into too much detail. But what you can see here, and this is the limiting factor that we're seeing in our trends, is time. The tech teams do not have time to not only manage what is currently required of keeping your systems running, but then when you add new developments on top of that, the refresh cycle, preparing for any types of cyber attacks, and also the desktop exercise. And regardless to how many DFE digital standards have been put out there, I don't see that schools improving their ability to protect themselves without more time being provided and more support, because it is a time-based exercise. The other trends that we are seeing is that the generic, the know before type stuff, if you're familiar with know before, training isn't generally working. So you see that there is a lot of cyber training out there that you as an IT team can choose, or your school can choose, but it's not necessarily relatable to the user experience of a user in your school. So even down to the extent that Microsoft versus Google, that's a different architecture. On-premise versus cloud, Mac versus Windows, the different systems that you're using, Bromcom versus Arbor. If you're not providing training to your teachers or to your students, that is actually relatable, then actually, in fact, you're not getting the engagement that you need, because people don't quite understand the context in terms of what it relates in terms of the environment that you're demonstrating. That again, it is a time-based exercise to make things more specific. But until there is a general approach to making the training specific to the use cases within your school, I think that general cybersecurity training isn't necessarily going to be working. And add to that, in many cases, we are seeing there's sort of two variants here. Training that's either too small, as in we'll just give it once at the beginning of the academic year in inset training, or that we have other schools that do know before training every 2 weeks, and that is becoming overwhelming and more of a distraction to teachers and other staff. The other thing that we're seeing in terms of the training is that it's not necessarily empathetic. As in, I know I'm using know before as an example, but that's just as a sort of as a use case. But we're not generally seeing a trend where there is empathy shown to people who receive an email and then click on it and put their credentials in, and therefore there is a sort of a nervousness around the entire process, because if they are the one to be caught out by, let's say, a simulated phishing campaign that is very, 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 very general, then actually that can have quite a level of detriment to the individual and the organization, not necessarily demonstrating the empathy associated with that type of testing. And therefore, just holistically, we are seeing this trend that that training isn't necessarily that effective to threats, either individually or organizationally. It's more of a checkpoint exercise. I don't have all the answers to this, by the way. I'm just giving you the overall trends in terms of what we're saying. So you can think of. I'll show you some examples of how we can help, but it's just useful for you to sort of think about what these trends are, depending on where you are with your journey. What I wanted to show you here was we have a service called red teaming, and red teaming is a more advanced level of social engineering. So you have your sort of know before one of the spectrum, that is generic social engineering through targeted phishing campaigns and whatnot. That is generally not how cyber attackers work these days. They don't do it. What they tend to do is they identify target schools, and then they spend time to understand who works in that school, what roles are they which roles of the school, what is the branding of emails of that specific school, what does an email footer look like from that school, and who would generally communicate with people from other schools similar to that school. So what our red teaming exercise does is that we mimic that behavior of a cyber attacker. So over a 6-week period, a school who's contracted with us will give us a list of staff who have either opted in or opted out of this exercise, depending on where that school is located and what their appetite is in terms of empathy with their staff. We always suggest that you get people to opt into this exercise. And our objective over that 6-week period is to mimic the behavior of a typical attacker. So we will look to connect with members of staff via LinkedIn, via Facebook, via Twitter, understand what they post, who they are, what their role is, and then what we do is we then create resources that are similar in brands to that specific school. So that may be that we create a new parent portal associated with that school. So in that instance, we go and buy a domain, very similar to the spelling of the school. We may create a new support desk, IT support at schoolname.io, for example. So similar in terms of what it may look like and brand it. And then over a period of 6 weeks, over these 6 weeks, our role is to try to influence the behaviour of members of staff within that school to do a number of things. First of all, number one, open emails. Number two is to visit a specific site. Number three, download a potential payload from us. But number four is to hand over their credentials to us. And what we see in this trend, just to give you a general statistic, out of 83 emails that were sent to a number of staff in a school last week, 2 members of staff handed over their credentials to us through this type of exercise. And I think we targeted in that cohort of staff maybe 15 members of staff. So the actual hit rate from specifically, an exercise where we have targeted through social engineering, mimicking how a typical cyber attacker would approach it is actually quite high when we really tailor our materials and we build trust over a period of time. So those people who gave us their credentials, those 2 people, we would have had 4 or 5 different personal back and forth responses with that individual to build trust to get their username and password. Now, with MFA being involved, we would still be blocked, for example, in accessing that person's Google or Office 365 accounts if there was a system such as MIS or any other type of system that didn't have MFA, then we're straight in. But even with MFA blocking us, because we have built up trust with that individual and they've given us their credentials through some means, either we've created a fake email, a fake portal, we could continue that and then go back to them and say, oh, okay, thanks for resetting your password. Oh, actually, we now need your unique 6-digit number that Microsoft have given you through your phone. And perhaps one in 2 people would probably then give us that data. We've not gone that level yet in terms of the red teaming exercise. But the general trend is that the generic stuff doesn't work. The more tailored approach does. And then the schools that generally we work with on a more tailored approach then take this and then they use that as part of their training. So they say, we did this exercise very specific to our school, A, B, C, D, here's the portal, this is what happened, here are the statistics. We need to learn from this, and therefore that then makes it more relatable and improves the understanding when it comes to cyber risk. When we're talking about trends, it wouldn't be right for me to just ignore AI as a threat. There's a couple of things here. The first thing is just on the left is where Arup lost $25 million in Hong Kong to a deepfake video conference scam, where essentially people joined Teams and they saw the finance director of Arup in person, but obviously it wasn't. It was AI, but the avatar had been generated to look like the FD, to have the voice of the FD, and the person in Hong Kong then transferred $25 million. And we are going to see a lot more of that, and we're going to see the sort of deep fakes ramping up quite significantly over the course of the next few years. Here, this table here is taken from the NCSC in terms of the threats that they see around AI from a report that was generated in January, and there's this is their assessment in terms of the types of threats that we are likely to see. And at 9, one of the core areas, yes, you have the deep fakes, but you're going to see a lot more around the reduction in time it takes for a cyber attack to take place through using AI. So I may have mentioned this on the previous ANME webinar or a 9 webinar if you joined. But at the moment, when you're doing a site, let's say we're attacking a cloud-based MIS, right? Which they are all now, apart from obviously SIMS, as I understand it. Now, when we're looking to test a code-based platform, it requires an individual to scan the code that presents itself on the internet. and you're scanning it without having any credentials, any username and passwords associated with that specific platform, to see whether then you can exploit that particular platform and get into the platform either through the back end, the front end, or through the database. That's generally what you're looking to do. Or the other way that you get in is you have managed to take, like I've managed to intercept Dave's session on as he's logged into his MIS. So let's say Dave's networking in his school is really robust. So I'm not being able to move laterally from his laptop through anywhere else in the school because it's completely locked down. But I've deployed a malware onto Dave's machine, and what I have done is I have managed to acquire the session cookie that tells this cloud-based MIS that Dave is authenticated into that MIS. I've then now taken that, so the MIS thinks I'm Dave, but I could be anywhere in the world, and I am now an authenticated user as Dave in that cloud-based MIS. And what I'm trying to do is exactly what I do from the internet, but I'm now inside the platform as an authenticated user, and I have a lot more greater ability to then go through all the different areas in that platform where you can input data, data fields, where I can upload different documents, where I can create new things. Any sort of box that you have in a system where you press like plus, open, whatnot, you can interrogate the code to see whether there's a vulnerability, to then exploit that vulnerability, navigate your way through the platform and either take it over through encrypting everything, or you can download data. At the moment, that requires an individual who needs to be talented to sort of understand how software is built and how software is architected. And two, it requires them to be able to exploit through new software code problems that they find within that code, not only at a front end and back end and database level. They need to do all those three different disciplines, and they have to do so while trying not to be detected by the software. So it takes quite a lot of effort to do that. Moving forward, AI can actually do that all itself, because it can write code, it can understand where to go, it can understand how to navigate through different types of software code to identify what the vulnerabilities are. So we are expecting to see a significant increase in the volume of attacks, not only through schools that have systems that are presented to the internet, such as an RDP server or any other type of server that is presented to the internet, but vendors who aren't undertaking pen tests regularly of their software. So I'll give you an example. We have a team of 10 cybersecurity consultants, and their role is to focus on our own software and working with our clients in pen testing. Every week we do a pen test of our platform. As we deploy new code to it, we do a pen test of that platform. So we probably do around 50 different pen tests a year of our own software code. And every time we deploy a new piece of software code, we see new vulnerabilities that have been created, and we classify those as critical, high, medium, low. And then if it's anything below, anything other than anything higher than a low, essentially we need to recode before we deploy that into production environment for our clients to use. We do that 50 times a year, and we see a significant number of vulnerabilities that we capture. Most platforms in education will probably do a pen test once a year. So what we're doing 50 times a year, they are doing once a year. And consequently, you have a lot of platforms that schools are using that at the moment are open to compromise, not necessarily from the internet where you're on the login screen, but through where someone is logged in, like Dave's logged in, when you are actually in that platform. So we expect to see, whilst we're seeing stuff here from the ARAP and from the NCSC, we are predicting a lot more in that particular area and that has an impact for schools. Certainly, if it's your cloud-based MIS platform that has been compromised, or your database in that has been compromised, there are specific requirements or issues if you haven't done your GDPR checks around that specific vendor, around their contracts, and if you may be one of the multi-academy trusts that has been affected by the ICO recently, who are currently asking a lot of MATs and academies to demonstrate how they have evaluated their cloud-based platform and edtech platforms, specifically because I'm guessing they are aware that these risks are increasing. I just put together a list of different things that where we see AI in schools, because there's been significant focus on how AI can improve productivity. So Gemini or ChatGPT, those are sort of more productivity generative AI, and then you have the EdTech AI about how to make kids smarter, or buy this this platform and suddenly our kids could be so much smarter in maths. But that is just one slice of the AI cake in a school. And these are some examples that we've just pulled together. There are loads more that we have, but they wouldn't fit all on the slide, of where we are currently seeing AI being implemented across the school, right, from Google through to the BMS, through to service desk, and even down to traffic shaping. What you're seeing from HP Aruba, and probably most other providers as well. But in each of these different areas, with AI being deployed, it's going to generate more and more risks that need to be managed. And these aren't necessarily technical risks, as in, I need to be CCNA or CCNP qualified to manage. These are more sort of subjective risks that need to be identified at a management layer and then thought about in terms of what we need to do to put some put some. I'm thinking of what the right word is, but essentially manage those risks. But again, all these things take time, right? And it's really hard to be spreading yourself so thin in these areas. The other thing that I just wanted to touch upon is I think the DFE have done some great work with the DFE digital standards. I think they're absolutely fantastic in giving a framework for schools. But I also feel they're limited in terms of the depth of detail that they go into. I feel that they need to be more directive in terms of what you should be doing as a school. So if you look at the academy, I apologize if you're not an academy, but there are governance standards for similar to the Academy Trust Handbook, the same sort of standards book for that. But essentially the Academy Trust Handbook says that you need to be compliant with the DFE digital standards, but when you go into the DFE digital standards, they aren't all as specific that actually help you measure your compliance. So the one here around network switching standards, on the technical requirements, just says NACs and policy management that ensures authorized mobile user devices, etc., etc. I would like to see more specific requirements. You need to have had a VLAN architecture with PLAs, ACLs, etc., etc., that will, when enforced, will actually protect you in these areas. And I understand why they want to be more generic, but in order to have a great impact from a trend level, in terms of trend, let's try to reduce cyber attacks. I think there needs to be more specifics around what is required in order for you to meet those meet the needs and better protect your better score. And obviously, we've touched upon the time thing here in terms of the trends. These trends take time, and time also means more resource. That means money. So I don't have an answer for you in terms of how you create more time. We have tools that create efficiencies and help you do things quicker, but it still requires time to do that stuff. Dave, do you have any questions coming in?
Just 1 second. I will bring myself back up on screen. There we go. So there's not been a huge amount of questions coming in through the Q&A at the moment. There's been one very cunningly named visitor called Network Admin who promotes the boxfish training that they've been doing. Says boxfish training is working great at our place. Can't praise boxfish enough. I think that was in response to your challenge to traditional cybersecurity training not being fit for purpose. Obviously, this is one example of a vendor and of a product. There are other vendors and products out there, so this isn't a boxfish loving or a boxfish hatred, depending on your response here. But I guess from my perspective there, that some training is better than no training. I would always say. I do very much agree with your point there in terms of the lack of empathy with some vendors. We kind of moved away from that "haha, we caught you" approach to. I saw a very interesting one of the ANME portals links to a blog post that was promoting the value of fire safety training and how that's done. So we all know that there's a fire drill. We all know that we need to evacuate from the building. Maybe we should take a more empathetic view to our training there. So I don't know what your thoughts are on that, Mark, or also on the network admin's post to say that boxes is working
I think
well
that first of all, I think from our trends, the things that I like to initiate are the conversations in terms of what is working well, and how your members can learn from one another in terms of if there are solutions out there that overcome some of these problems, because that is what you want to be targeted on, looking at what is working well that will overcome. Because even, I know I've put on Know Before immediately will have a positive impact within your school because it's never it's never worked. You may have never done it before, but once you get to the third time of doing it, that is when you start seeing the detriment in terms of it not necessarily working so well. So when I say trend, I'm sort of more focused on people who have been doing this for some time, but actually it's losing its impact. So like any conversations and recommendations from your members that can support one another, I think it's fantastic. I think it's the conversation that really is supportive to your members rather than the sort of specific products.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess the other thing that I was observing towards the end there, and this is a little tongue in cheek, but based on what you've been saying there, should we all be going back to on-prem MISs and ditching all these wonderful AI tools that are expanding our threat surface? Because this is one of the things that can be extrapolated, isn't it? With all these new products that are coming out, the threats that are out there have got a greater surface to stick to.
They have a different threat. They have a different context. They change your they do change your attack surface. So I don't think commercially you're never going to be able to go back to an on-premise environment, because the commercials of a SaaS-based product put it all in the control of the supplier, and also reduce the overhead for you as a school to manage those things. And the trajectory is only going to get stronger. That cloud-based is better, but it has different risks associated with it. And cloud providers are going to have to do more than one pen test a year, and you as a network manager of the school will want to know how many pen tests they're doing, because they are protecting your data under the GDPR. It gives you the right to audit those organizations, so you have the right to ask these questions. The other thing you said was
it was around AI and the kind of proliferate. That word, proliferation of AI tools coming out there, and the perhaps the lack of confidence that that we can have, because every day we get, my inbox is a battle between the latest AI tool that's coming out and the latest security company that's popping up to protect us from these things. So
yeah, so and a lot of the technology that you'll see around managing AI is just immature in terms of how it operates. We've got a new AI toolkit that's coming out that can support schools to sort of to sort of manage how you evaluate what AI you should be having. The EU have published their new AI regulation that I know in the UK, once the election's over, we'll have something similar. And that classifies AI into 4 or 5 different categories. Ones that say green light you can use, number two, you have to do, sorry, number 1 you can't use, 2 you have to do this level assessment, 3 you do this level assessment. So it classifies those down. But in order to use them, you as a school then need to evaluate what is happening with the personal data being put into that system. Can that influence the behavior of the children? What are the safeguarding risks associated with it? So there's a huge amount of stuff coming to that. I will come on to some solutions at the end. I suppose now I'm sort of conscious of time that I've sort of stopped. And
I will shut up and let you carry on with your presentation then, Mark.
Fine, Dave. So these are a couple of just examples of 2 hacks that have recently happened. And I just want to just briefly plow through these in terms of what happened and also why. So there's some sort of takeaways here. So the first one was a hybrid school on-prem and cloud. The attacker located VPN credentials that are still active via a legacy COVID VPN. So in one of those most recent data dumps, NAS.API, for example, that was dumped in December, then that had credentials associated with the VPN accounts that hadn't been changed since a member of staff had used it for COVID. So it was still operational. The username and password hadn't changed. The attacker got in through that specific school using that specific VPN. It got straight to the domain controller. They downloaded all the usernames and passwords and went on to compromise the systems and data. Again, that's a manual piece of work where the attacker had gone through the NAS.API databases, 700 million records or something ridiculous. Essentially, this is the day one attack started here, and there are some people within IT thought something weird was going on, but the director of IT wasn't informed until day 4, and then the day 6 was when the impact was sort of started to be known. But in that point there, the school were just accepting the total risk of failure and the systems being completely compromised. And it wasn't until day 14 that they understood the actual severity of the breach. And rather than re-imaging everything in the school, which would be the requirement given the extent of that attack, they have decided, it's only 6 weeks ago, decided to continue operating with doing as minimal as they can, wiping of everything until the summer term, because they wanted to minimize the operational disruption to school. But they've accepted that there still may be the cyber attacker may still be in assistance somewhere, ready to deploy a different malware. And when we look at, again, some of these things linked back to the trends that I've talked about, some of the reasons why they were successful to that attack. Obviously, first one, the VPN was not being managed on the operational side. There weren't differentiated controls around access into the systems by tech teams. Their time to respond hadn't been tested, so there was no desktop exercise around responding to a cyber attack. So a lot of that time when they're accepting the risks, that could be reduced if they had done more disaster recovery planning in terms of those scenarios. And the RPA records for those, right? So those of you looking for RPA, you have to have an incident management plan. You have to have an incident management process and procedure. We have that templated. We have our own software platform allows you to manage your incidents. So we have an RPA compliant platform if you're interested. Not the right procedures, secure configuration wasn't in place, and there's a lot of legacy user accounts. So a lot of people, not only staff and students, but just ancillary user and service accounts that were still active, and the attacker, because they'd got access to all the AD passwords and accounts, started using different service accounts and different accounts to do things. And there was like a whole piece of work trying to work out what was going on. Another one here was a cloud first. This was an academy, and cloud first with a single on-prem server for local services, and also for AD. And essentially the attacker came in and they deployed a malware, and they started encrypting all of the files that had kept on the local file store, around child protection files, anything that was in the old file store, and a range of other services and data. And whilst there, a lot of data was backed off and protected, there was no documentation about how to rebuild anything. And because they had to then break the authentication between the domain, the cloud-based platform, and their local domain, they then broke all of the cloud-based authentication between all of the individual systems, and then everything had to be rebuilt from scratch. So, for example, cashless catering, that had to be wiped and started again. So I can't remember who the firm were, but probably one of the leading catering firms. To rebuild that cashless catering system, it wasn't just a restore from a backup. They treated it as a greenfield site. That's £12,000, please, just the rebuild. Printing and photocopiers was exactly the same. Oh, well, it's basically a greenfield site now. So we know our contract doesn't cover responding to this type of incident. It's a greenfield site. That's £7,000 of consultancy. So in this scenario, they hadn't done any operational assessments. There hadn't been sufficient level of training. The responsibilities were unclear, and consequently they had these costs to absorb, but also the implications of having to restore all of their systems and to incur those costs. This school was outside of RPA, and this school was part of RPA, but the support offered was limited to them, and it was basically passed down to the school to cover a lot of those costs. So we've got some effective approaches to implement cyber strategy at school. I will be talking about some of the things that we offer. This is a basic diagram of a school and the infrastructure around cyber attacks. So you've got your firewall here. As an attacker, what I'm trying to do, I'm either trying to get in through a vulnerable web app. That could be as simple as your website and the associated systems off your website. Or as an attacker, I'm trying to get hold of, get in through phishing. Or you have a malicious insider. We see more of this. Students seeing how far they can get. All in play to get your systems, services, and whatnot. The RPA requires you to have an incident plan that covers all of these things, really, to be able to protect your data and for you to be able to recover quickly. So the whole idea by them having that requirement is, if they have that requirement across all of their schools, then actually the risk exposure to them is significantly reduced, because schools will react quicker, the damage will be less, and therefore the money that they have to pay from the RPA will be less. That is like the commercial reality, but the commercial reality behind it all. Later this summer, we have this thing called 9 Academy, which is a digital platform for training, and it's not just training staff, as in like training your teachers or your the administrative side of your staff. It's differentiated training. So you have differentiated training at a network manager level. So network manager level, implementing ACLs. What do you need to do? okay, there's 5 videos, there's a quiz associated with how you do it, and you've got all the resources to go away and do that, all the way through to these are example courses that we've got. But essentially, it's cybersecurity, data protection, risk management, and sort of tech operations for network managers. So there's no real professional development that is accessible on demand for school tech leaders. So we have built courses that you can undertake. With the RPA, one of the things you have to do is you have to evidence that all of your staff have watched the NCSE training, that YouTube video, and in order to qualify for cover. But it's difficult, to push that out and to evidence it. So what we are doing is we are offering that training course free of charge for 3 months through the 9 platform for a limited number of schools, and those schools need to speak to Charlie before the end of July in order to qualify. But what will that allow you to do is it will allow you to enroll all of your teachers and all of your support staff in that training course. They will take it through the 9 Academy. We're broken down. There'll be a number of quizzes associated with it. They'll get certificates, and you can evidence all of your staff who've actually done that. So it's a way that takes the pain of actually pushing it out and being able to report back about who hasn't done that for RPA. But then there are differentiated levels of training within 9 Academy, and some of those are CPD certified, some of them aren't CPD certified. But Charlie can take you through that, and as I say, it'll be free of charge for 3 months for a certain number of schools. Beyond that time, you'd have to pay for it. Dave, did you have a question?
Yeah, quick question. Have we had any kind of dialogue with the RPA to confirm that these courses will be accepted by them as satisfying their requirements?
It's the actual course from the NCSE.
So it's the NCSE one. You're just delivering it through this platform. Gotcha.
Exactly. Yeah. So essentially, what we are topping and tailing the course. We're going to break the course down and break the video down into bite-sized chunks, quiz associated with the most relevant points, and then you can see who's done the test, who hasn't done the test. So you can benchmark, yeah. And then it'll be integrated into single sign-on, so you can enroll all your staff. We're using Wand. So we use one to do that. We have a cost per school over those 3 months. And then if you choose to use other features of 9 Academy, you can buy courses on demand, or you can buy the whole thing. But everything in there is based upon what we do working in schools. So it's not just theory, it's about things that I've been talking to you today about, the trends that we see, and the things that are very useful for IT professionals in schools. So that's the first thing, 9 Academy. The other thing we have is a thing called the governance library coming out, and at the moment we have our cyber risk self-audit that is free of charge. And when you come into the 9 governance platform, you don't see this view. So what this is these are in essence different projects that allow you to evaluate and manage your DFE digital standards, allow you to implement a disaster recovery plan. It allows you to evaluate and implement ACLs, port level authentication. So if you think about a professional resource in terms of how to do things at a technical level, step by step, supported by resources, that is 9 governance. So to date, we haven't had the front end. We haven't made it look very pretty. If you come in onto our freemium, you either get this one here or you get this one here, but without all the niceties around it. So this is a resource that is coming out, and these are the toolkits that are available. Interestingly, both within the 9 Academy and within the governance library, you as a school or as a trust, you can create your own training and we can upload it. So if you wanted more specific training to your school, we can put that into our platform that we have built. You can have it branded as your own school. You can create your own quiz and push it out to your own staff. And here, if you're in a multi-academy trust, you can create your own projects. So any types of projects can be pre-templated and pushed out to all of the network managers in your trust. Or if you are working as a cohort of network managers in individual academies, there's no reason why you can't create your own project plans of specific things and deploy them, to, but they will come to us to deploy, but we can then push them out to all of the schools that are working with you, that you're working together. So it's a very useful resource. You may want to book in time with Charlie, and she'll be able to showcase that in more detail. And one of the last things I wanted to talk about is we've got the 9 Tech Academy. So this is a certified professional development program. It starts in November each year. Last year we had 80 schools on it from around the world. So it's not just UK, it's UK, international, and US, North America. And there are 3 different streams: security standards, frameworks, and accreditation, network security and standards, and cyber awareness. You choose which stream you want to be in, or more of those. And then these are the courses, the modules for each of them. So the whole of each month is either 1 or 2 modules, or for up to 2 hours. There's theory that you go through. You then have a homework of checklists you need to go away and implement. You do scenario-based exercises in groups virtually within the platform with colleagues from other schools. As I said, not only colleagues in the UK, but colleagues internationally, and it gives you a way to improve your professional development in these areas. And it is a certified professional development program. Again, there's more information can be received from Charlie. And here are the offers. You've got your DFE Digital Standards self-audit. That's free. You can get started. But we've got some really, we're basically giving it away when we look at a cost perspective. But number 2 here is we'll do a cybersecurity infrastructure testing. That's pen testing of your systems architecture. You have the incident management platform for compliance with the RPA, 9 Academy for all staff training, and 9 governance to manage DFE digital standards for £2,500. And you get all the above plus professional development by going on the Tech Academy, 1 work stream of your choice. And also we have the Privacy Academy for £3,500. You've got the 3 months access to 9 Academy on the NCSE training. You need to meet with Charlie before the end of July to get eligibility for that. And lastly, any of you using GDPR in schools or any similar thing to that platform, when it comes up to license renewal, we'll give you our platform, which is better, more intelligent, for half the cost of what you're currently paying. And again, that is through Charlie. So a range of different offers there around our products and services that hopefully you will be appreciated by those who are attending. And that was it, Dave. Oh, sorry. Lastly, application library, new module coming out. This is where you can build your library of applications that you can deploy to your teachers. And for each application, then they can see the rating. So teachers can give reviews to the applications that they're using in their classroom. They can access all the how-to guides. And this dovetails directly, Dave, into the compliance process. So, for example, if someone asks for an AI platform that you want, you can use our platform to automate the compliance process. And then you can publish that application into application library with all the how-to guides, the age restrictions. Teachers then can give a review of that specific application, so that you can really evidence the impact. And from a school perspective, you can reduce the duplication and the feature set of applications by building your application library, but also then controlling how teachers and other members of staff request new applications. You basically say, go to the application library. They can search by maths, curriculum area, age group, iPad, whatever, and then it will show them the apps that are approved within the school. And if they want anything else, they can request it. Again, that is coming out in the summer, and that will be sold by itself, but you can get that free of charge if you buy our vendor management solution. Vendor management is all pre-assessed compliance. But anyway, that's my sales pitch done. So yeah, hopefully there's some useful things there in terms of the entire webinar.
Loads to consider there. Thank you so much, Mark. That's been really valuable. It's a great use of an hour. We do have a few questions that have come in, yep, which in the last minute before we hit 4:30, we'll rush through. So the first one was, any feedback on the usefulness of one's MIS data recovery? offering. So Wand have released this offering, haven't they, where they will back up your MIS data and act as a
I think
repository for
we've
it.
just, I mean, we've done, I've, to be honest, we've not looked at that ourselves. Like we've just moved from Backupify to Red Store because it's half the cost from
Mhm.
our environment. We've not looked at what one they're offering, but I will ask our technical team to take a look at that.
Yeah, I think from my understanding, though, it's more of a matter of holding some of the data so that in the worst case scenario where you have an attack and you're unable to access your MIS, they have a way of surfacing some data for you. So can't say that I've used it myself, but interesting to get feedback on that.
Yeah,
Question from Gary Carr: which type of cyber attacks do you find most common in schools? Is it
phishing.
phishing, RDP access, or unauthorized software installations?
Yeah,
Phishing all the way, I
it,
would imagine.
yeah, it's phishing and it's closely followed by RDP. I mean, you can what you can so how an attacker gets in by RDP, you can search. We have a tool that we can search all of the ports associated with RDP, associated with schools that's linked to your IP address. So what attackers are doing is they're using that tool to look at RDP servers that then haven't been updated and are susceptible to an exploit. And so they're doing that in real time. So when you see a school that has been when you generally see a school that has had an attack, it's because it's been through an RDP, and it's because they haven't updated the RDP server or any infrastructure associated with the RDP server. And like anyone on this call, we could set up an alert associated with, I want to search for schools using RDP on these specific ports. And then when you get the alert, and then you can start trying the exploit based upon the vulnerability that's been identified. So the moment, anyone can do that.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And just before I go to the last question that I can see, I will draw people's attention to the link that Charlie has just dropped in there around linking to getting started today and unveil the possibilities. The last question that I can see at the moment is, are these prices per school and are discounts available for trusts? Although I have just seen that Charlie has prompted the person to email them on that one.
Yeah, like from our to give you a bit of context of Nine, we in the past 5 years we've grown significantly internationally, and we've not really had a products and services that are at a price point for academies and multi-academy trusts, and that's just because the way that we've grown our business. Our focus this year is very much on academies and trusts. We have a big focus on independent schools in North America and in internationals in the Middle East. My message to Charlie is, we won't be beaten on price. Like we've got some really good rate solutions that we will be the most cost effective, offering the best solution. And any costs that you have from other suppliers, we will beat those costs in this marketplace. So that's like my promise to Charlie, and that's my promise to you guys.
Amazing. Thank you very much. My final comment is just the appreciation of your use of Rydal High as your example school. It prompted me to ask you to tell me more. And that just shows that I'm an old man. And for all the young people on the call, that's a reference to the film Grease. But there we go. Thank you so much, Mark, for your time today, and thank you, Charlie, as well for staying on the call. We will be posting this video on the portal later this week once we've tidied up all the bits that I'm in, probably, and we'll also put details of the offer that's available to ANME members on there as well. Anything else that you wanted to end on, Mark?
No, I was like, really appreciate you taking your time to attend. I really hope that's been useful. And yeah, I look forward to receiving the feedback after you guys have submitted your forms.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Yep. The feedback form is live now on the portal. So if you go onto the portal, ANME portal, you will be prompted to fill that in if you've signed up for this webinar. Please do provide feedback. It is tremendously useful, whether it's positive or negative. It helps us to shape which webinars to offer in the future, which partners to work with, and also it helps Mark to see just how good a job he's doing as well. So please do take the time to fill that in. It'll only take a couple of minutes. Other than that, I'll thank everyone for attending. Teams is one of those things that when I end the meeting, it's just going to cut everybody off. So don't worry, don't feel that we're nasty people. We just have to say thank you and goodbye. So thank you and goodbye.